Well, I think the film pursues ideas of time in very everyday contexts and in philosophical contexts, in scientific contexts. Ultimately, it ends with one of the simplest statements given by my mother about how it's important to live the life you want to live. So the film really travels through different interpretations and dimensions of what time could be. And I think it also suggests that time is probably just an idea that we have created to organize our experience. I think in the making of the film, certain things became quite apparent. One of them being the fact that cinema is a time-based medium, that it inherently has a number of minutes associated with it. It has a structure, it has a beginning, middle, and end, which sort of defines it as a time object. And within that time object, you can radically play with the perception of time. You know, you can compress and elongate and refer back. You can have déjà vu. You can, play with it in those ways. So really, making a film about time, it's automatically a film about film and time. It's part of it. And then the other situation, which is actually not so obvious in film, is space, because you become aware, as Einstein's theory of relativity suggested or stated, that time and space are linked. So it really depends where you are in terms of how you measure time, and that goes all the way through, or all the way back to the Big Bang, the idea of when did time start, and what's our position in that scale of the expanding universe. So there's visual means by which that became more apparent in the filmmaking. The most obvious being looking into space with telescopes and understanding that we're actually looking at something that doesn't even exist anymore. We're looking at the light that's traveling towards us, which in the physics concept of time is nearer to the beginning of time. So space was played with, and it also was used in the surround sound of the theater. It's one of the first times I've played with that more extensively, where you actually can create for an audience member a distance of space, because you hear something in the front that can move to the back, and you yourself find yourself in a position surrounded by an object, but the object is sound. So there's different ways that it played that game too. Yeah, I discovered that image somehow just on the internet. I don't even remember how I came to it exactly, but I always liked the idea of introducing a film with someone falling from space and landing on the ground, kind of an introduction to Earth. And I also like the idea that at the beginning of the film, you see a rare image, which is a human being and the Earth. To see those two things in the same frame doesn't happen very often, although we're more familiar with it now with space imagery. But then that was my initial interest in it. But then as I edited the film and developed it further, the idea also, again, of the theory of relativity, of a person's time and space being different than a person's time on the ground, became a part of the interest. But the main thing was that he himself, Joe Kittinger, when he was falling towards the Earth, talked about this sort of temporary state that he was in, where everything seemed to have stopped because there was no more atmosphere. so he didn't feel any wind on his body as he was falling. He was just like seeming to be floating there. And it was like, oh, maybe I'm stuck here. Maybe this is it. Maybe time has stopped. So we actually used that as a kind of poetic construct in the film, which became a big part of the film. But all that happened during the course of making the film. It wasn't set up at the beginning. Well, I think the end of the film kind of comes back to basics. I had visited my mother on Mother's Day, in fact, and I showed her my camera and I asked her some of the questions that I've been asking other people, but I never thought I would put it in the film. However, during editing, I came across that and looked at it again and thought, oh, this is very touching. And I mean, there's a number of things that scene does for the film. I think it brings things back down to earth, down to a very simple level after we've seen, you know, the scientists in CERN kind of pushing the limits of our knowledge, trying to learn more and more about who we are. We've seen abstractions of you know, cinematic depictions of abstract possibilities of time. But then when it boils down to it, you know, there you have the filmmaker and the filmmaker's mother sort of being aware of our own mortality and our own human time frame, which is really the thing that we can relate to the strongest. And every day and how every day we would really like to have a good day and to be, you know, doing something meaningful and living what we want to live. So that's where it ends up. That's seemed like the most important place to be. Thanks.